afternoon. Tony Dottino here with you, doing my Life with Tony on Monday, December the 20th. And Christmas is coming just a few days away. Football season is in its 14th week, and teams are jockeying around for position. And I took a few days last week. We had this mid 80-degree temperatures here in the Orlando area and spent some time at the Kennedy Space Center and the National Seashore Beach and Cocoa Beach. So spent a little bit of time on the beaches as well as a whole lot of time at the Kennedy Space Center, which was absolutely phenomenal. When you look at these rockets that we can see here as they launch here, and we see the orange plume go up into the sky, to actually go into the museum and the different exhibits of Apollo and the new Falcon 9 rockets that they're shooting, and the Challenger and the Space Shuttle, and what these men and women had to do, learn, achieve. It's mind-blowing to me when I think of, in looking at these rockets and all of the wiring and the elements and the pieces that come together, and how every one of them has to be exactly perfect for the launch to go, for the rocket or the craft to then orbit the Earth and the skies, and get to the moon or get to the space station, and what then has to happen for it to come back. And when you actually see these physical tools and instruments and vehicles, and just to think of what goes into the thinking behind these and how all of these pieces have to come together. It's amazing because I think of it in terms of work I've done in business organizations where we try to get an invoice out properly, we try to get a billing document reconciled, or we try to get orders for medications properly done and filled, and operate on the correct body parts, and things that we do in our medical facilities and the challenges that they face. And yet we sometimes have to figure out, how do we mobilize a team of people to engage in being the best they can be, and use their mental capacities and their creativity to really do the best job. In fact, best job, they got to do a perfect job if you're out in a space program. We have lost a couple of people, one on exit, leaving the Earth, and one on coming back to the Earth. And when you study what the elements of human thinking was and the mistakes that were made, you just realize in the space program there is no room for mistakes, because people instantly die in front of millions of people who watch these things on television. And so looking at some of the current launches. But the key question that was interesting to me was, went to the Heroes and Legends exhibit, where they have a whole wall of video clips of people that have been involved in the space program. And then they've got a Hall of Fame section where they have the astronauts, the men and women that are the actual beings that go onto these launches and sit in these launch chairs. And you look at the capsules and how 6 people or 4 people sit in there, and we're told, we did a launch thing. So we sat in a chair and we sat for 6 minutes, and the guide basically said the astronauts sitting there for hours as the rocket goes up into the sky and it has to orbit. And so we're sitting there for 6 minutes, and the chair is, I mean, you hear the boom and the blast and the sounds, and think that they could sit there for hours. It's just amazing how we make all of these things happen and do it. But what I found most interesting was the characteristics. They had video clips of astronauts. Why did you want to be an astronaut, and what did you have to do, and what was the study that you had to go through? And one of the astronauts said, but before I could even file an application, I was asked a couple of very significant questions that either would have got me in or out, and then I got tested for in or out. And it was the characteristics of what you needed to have as a characteristic of human thought and human behavior in order to even be considered to be an astronaut. And I wonder if you could think of what those would be. I kind of thought back of the research we do in the elements of brain health, and I kind of guessed at it. I was right on one of the elements, and I didn't realize the other one because of how they define them. But it was, how would you respond to duress? So how do you respond to things that don't go as well as you would expect them to go? So the word was duress, and so how do you handle duress? And so they get put through these different role plays of duress, situations of duress. Now you say, why do they go through elements of duress? Well, as one of the exhibits asked, of all of the launches we've ever had, how many do you think have been absolutely perfect? And there was nothing unexpected that ever happened. And so we were learning about redundancies and backup plans. It's kind of like you're flying on a plane, and how would you like to think that if one thing goes wrong, there goes the plane? Well, duress is one of these things that they're saying you have to be able to respond to duress, meaning an unforeseen situation occurs. How do you respond to it? Do you use the creative mind and get your mental set there? And I remember listening to an exhibit with John Glenn when they had a problem with his mission, the first mission to space that he had, and they were having a problem in a discussion down on Earth in their mission control room, and they've got this recording of John Glenn saying, "Look, I need to know all the information that you guys know, and stop, don't hide anything from me. Tell me exactly what it is, because I'm the one that's up here, and I've got to make a decision of what I need to do." It's like, whoa, here you are, front line. He's the man up in the spacecraft, and he needs to make a decision. I'd say John Glenn handled the rest of the situation fairly well, very pointed and very direct in terms of what he needed to be able to do, which they eventually did. And obviously, John Glenn got back into Earth. He was a senator in the country and served our country in multiple ways in a very honorable and fantastic way. But the issue of unexpected things come at you. So when something unexpected comes at you, how do you handle it? And if you handle it by freaking out and freezing and paralyzing, well, you're not a good candidate for the space program. But if you can exercise a thought process and analytical and then creative, so what are some of the options and alternatives? I call them growing branches of action items, and then execute. Then hey, you passed the first gate. And then the second one is from duress, you now have a physiological response in the body called stress. That was the one I guessed. I said stress, of course. How does one handle stress? And we handle stress in one of two ways. We handle it in a positive way of igniting our creativity, which is, in this case, something goes wrong in a space shot program. Boy, you better have creativity, and you better have a level of adrenaline that pushes you to coming up with the best solutions and ideas, but analytical and creative. But you better be able to handle that in a very focused and calming way. So there's a level of stress that sets the adrenaline going, that says, I need to create new solutions. Or do you handle stress by where you freeze and you just lock up, and now you're not thinking and you're not processing well, and therefore you're likely to do something that ends your life, or does something that destroys the mission and maybe the people that are with you. So all of the people in the mission have to be able to handle the rest of an unexpected situation and not emotionally stress to the point where you are frozen and you lock up. And I always think of this because sometimes I think we all have levels of stress in our life. We're having levels of stress right now during the COVID epidemics, and we keep hearing about the different viruses and the epidemics and things of that sort, and we get stressed. Now, how do we go about handling the stress? And do we be creative in our own lives to figure out where our own little sphere and world is and deal with that in a positive way? Or do we do silly and sometimes stupid things that may not be helpful and actually may be more harmful in terms of what we do? So for an astronaut, understand you're going to have unexpected situations, but you understand also that you need to use the stress in your life in a positive way, and the stress you may get from that, where you might not tense up and freeze up, but hear it, see it, and do the fight or flight, which is what we're hardwired to do in moments of stress where we feel our lives are in danger. And that's where the adrenaline rush comes in, and this acetylcholine and the cortisol spike in the body. But they spike in the body in one of two ways. It can poison it and destroy, or we can use it in a positive way to figure out what is it that we need to do. And I think Apollo 13, when you listen to the filming of Apollo 13 and listen to the conversations they were having on the Apollo 13 mission, the movie's been made on a historical, the stress, first the duress and things that were that didn't go according to plan, and then what they needed to do to put their heads together to figure out how to bring the men and women that were on that craft back to Earth in a safe manner. So those are the two characteristics for an astronaut. And so if anybody out there in my Live with Tony audience wants to think about being an astronaut, or have family members or kids that saw a space movie, Flash Gordon in my days, Star Trek in the Gen days, you need to be able to say, when things don't go right in your life, what do you do about it? And how do you handle the physiological stress that comes into it from the restful situation in a constructive way that brings you to better outcomes? And to that regard, we're in a country, in a world of stress. We have variants of a virus, and we've got men and women that are using their creativity to figure out, okay, so we got this variant that came up now, what do we do next? And those are the men and women that are flying or in our spacecraft that are leaving the Kennedy launching pads at Cape Canaveral and coming back to Earth safely. I just was fabulous, just totally blown away by it. If any of you get to visit the Orlando, Central Florida area, I tell you, it is clearly worth a day to go out to the Kennedy Space Center and just see what these men and women are able to achieve and do, and just marvel at how we impacts our own lives on a day-to-day basis. We shall see you on Wednesday evening. Nice to be back with you. And by the way, being out there Thursday, Friday is why I got home late and did not do a session on Friday. So back up on Monday. I should have a good week, though Friday this week is Christmas Eve, so I'm not sure what we'll be on doing Friday. But in any case, have a good week, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.